Greetings, one and all, to the most cursed, most cringiest corner of the internet. A YouTube channel content creator, actively alienating everyone, in both the analog and digital world. Well, welcome and good evening, wonderful dice of all alignments. I am Lunar D8. This is part 5 of Grimm's Fairy Tales. Today, we're going to read The Wolf and the Seven Little Kids, The Foundling Bird, The Willow Wren and the Bear, Sweetheart Roland, Mother Holle, the White Snake, the Queen Bee, the Golden Goose, and Jorinda and Jorindel. The Wolf and the Seven Little Kids. There once upon a time was an old goat who had 7 little kids and loved them with all the love of a mother for her children. One day she wanted to go into the forest and fetch some food. So she called all 7 to her and said, "Dear children, I have to go into the forest. Be on your guard against the wolf. If he come in, he will devour you, skin, hair, and all. The wretch often disguises himself, but you will know him at once by his rough voice and his black feet." The kid said, "Dear mother, we will take good care of ourselves. You may go away without any worry." Then the old one bleated and went on her way with easy mind. It was not long before someone knocked at the house. The door called, "Open the door, dear children, your mother is here, and has brought something back with her for each of you." But the little kids knew that it was the wolf, by the rough voice. "We will not open the door," cried they. "Thou art not our mother. She has a soft, pleasant voice, but thy voice is rough. Thou art the wolf." Then the wolf went away to the shopkeeper and brought himself a great lump of chalk, ate this, and made his voice soft with it. Then he came back and looked at the door of the house and cried, "Open the door, dear children, your mother is here and has brought something back with her for each of you." But the wolf had laid his black paws against the window, and the children saw them and cried, "We will not open the door. Our mother has not black feet like thee. Thou art the wolf." Then the wolf ran to a baker and said, "I have hurt my feet. Rub some dough over them for me." And when the baker had rubbed his feet all over, he ran to the miller and said, "Strew some white meal over my feet for me." The miller thought to himself, "The wolf wants to deceive someone," and refused. But the wolf said, "If thou wilt not do it, I will devour thee." Then the miller was afraid, and made his paws white for him. Truly, men are like that. So now the wretch went for the 3rd time to the house of the goat, and knocked at it and said, "Open the door for me, little children. Your dear mother has come home, and has brought every one of you something back from the forest with her." And the curse cried, "First, show us thy paws, that we may know if thou art our dear mother." Then he put his paws to the window, and when the kids saw that they were white, they believed all that he said was true, and opened the door, but who should come in but the wolf? And they were terrified and wanted to hide themselves. One sprang under the table, the second under the bed, the third into the stove, the 4th into the kitchen, the 5th into the cupboard, the 6th into the washing bowl, and the 7th into the clock case. But the wolf found them all, and used no great ceremony. One after another he swallowed them down his throat. The youngest, who was the clock case, was the only one he did not find. When the wolf had satisfied his appetite, he took himself off, laid himself down under a tree in the great meadow outside, and he began to sleep. Soon afterwards the old goat came home again from the forest. Ah, what a sight she saw there! The house door stood open, the table, chairs, and benches were thrown down, and the washing bowl lay broken to pieces, and the quilts and pillows were pulled off the bed. She sought her children, but they were nowhere to be found. She called them one after the other by name, but no one answered. At last, when she came to the youngest, a voice softly cried, "Dear mother, I am in the clock case." She took the kid out, and it told her all that the wolf had done, and eaten all the others. Then you may imagine how she wept over her poor children. At length, in grief, she went out, and the youngest kid ran with her. When they came to the meadow, there lay the wolf by the tree, and snored so loud that the branches shook. She looked at him on every side, and saw that something was moving and struggling, and gorged in his belly. "Ah, heaven," said she, "it is possible that my poor children, whom he has swallowed down for his supper, can still be alive." Then the kid had to run home and fetch scissors, and a needle and a thread. and the goat cut open the monster's stomach, and hardly had she made one cut, than one little kid thrust its head out. And when she cut farther, all 6 sprang out one after the other, and were all still alive, and suffered no injury whatsoever, for in his greediness the monster had swallowed them down whole. What rejoicing there was! They embraced their dear mother, and jumped like a tailor at his wedding. The mother, however, said, "Now go and look for some big stones, and we will fill the wicked beast's stomach with them while he still sleeps." Then the 7th kid dragged the stones thither, and with all speed he put as many of them into the stomach as he could get in, and the mother sewed him up in great haste, so that he was not aware of anything, and never once stirred. When the wolf at length had his sleep out, he got on his legs, and the stones in his stomach made him very thirsty. He went down to a well to drink, but when he began to walk and move about, the stones in his stomach knocked against each other, and rattled, and cried, "What rumbles and tumbles against my poor bones? I thought 'twas 6 kids, but it's not but big stones." And when he got to the well, he stopped over the well, and just about to drink, the heavy stones made him fall in, and there was no help, but he had to drown miserably. When the 7 kids saw that, they came running to the spot and cried aloud, "The wolf is dead, the wolf is dead," and danced for joy around the well with their mother. The Foundling Bird. There once was a forester who went into the forest to hunt, and as he entered it he heard a sound of screaming, as if a little child were there. He followed the sound, and at last came to a high tree. At the top of this a little child was sitting, for the mother had fallen asleep under the tree with the child, and a bird of prey had seen it in her arms, and flown down and snatched it away, and set it on the high tree. The forester climbed up, brought the child down, and thought to himself, "Thou wilt take him home with thee, and bring him up as thy Lena." I am so confused. So did the mother die? So I assume she's dead. Okay, he took it home, therefore the 2 children grew up together. The one, however, which he had found under a tree was called a foundling bird. Does no one have any creativity when it comes to names? Because a bird had carried away, the foundling and Lena loved each other so dearly that when they did not see each other they were sad. The forester, however, had an old cook, who one evening took 2 pails and began to fetch water, and did not go once only, but many times out to the spring. Lena saw this and said, "Hark you, old Sana, why are you fetching so much water? If thou wilt never repeat it to anyone, I will tell thee why." So Lena said no, she would never repeat it to anyone. Then the cook said, "Early tomorrow morning, when the forester's out hunting, I will heat the water, and when it is boiling in the kettle, I will throw in the foundling, and will boil him in it." The fuck is wrong with everybody? Betimes next morning, the forester got up and went out hunting, and when he was gone, the children were still in bed, and Lena said to the foundling, "If thou wilt never leave me, I too will never leave thee." "Well, at least that's endearing." The foundling said, "Neither now nor ever will I leave thee." Then said Lena, "Then I will tell thee. Last night the old Sana carried so many buckets of water into the house. I asked her what she was doing, and she said that if I would promise not to tell anyone, she would tell me, and I said I would be sure not to tell anyone. And she said early tomorrow morning, when father was out hunting, which is like right now, she would set the kettle full of water, and throw thee into it, and boil thee. But we will get up quickly, dress ourselves, and go away together." The 2 children therefore got up, dressed themselves quickly, and went away. When the water in the kettle was boiling, the cook went into the bedroom to fetch the foundling, again, that's not a good name for a child, and throw him into it. But when she came in and went to the beds, both the children were gone. Then she was terribly alarmed, and said to herself, "What shall I say to the forester who comes home and sees that the children—" "You were already planning to eat one of them! Do you think that was going to get glossed over?" "They must be followed instantly to get them back again." "Why? It's not like you're a safe environment for them. Fuck!" Then the cook sent 3 servants after them, who were to run and overtake the children. The children, however, were sitting outside the forest, and when they saw far away 3 servants come, Lena said to the foundling, "Never leave me, and I will never leave thee." The foundling said, "Neither now nor ever." Then said Lena, "Do thou become a rose tree, and I rose upon it?" What? When the 3 servants came to the forest, there was nothing there but a rose tree and a rose on it, but the children were nowhere. They said, "There is nothing to be done here," and they went home and told the cook. They just magically transformed into a bush and flowers? What? They had seen nothing in the forest but a little rose bush with 1 rose on it. Then the old cook scolded and said, "You simpletons, you should have cut the rose bush in 2 and have broken off the rose and brought it home with you. You go and do it once." They had therefore to go out and look for the second time. The children saw it from distance. And then Lena said, "Foundling bird, never leave me, and I will never leave thee." The foundling said, "Neither now nor ever." Said Lena, "Then do thou become a church, and I'll become a chandelier in it?" So when the 3 servants came, nothing was there but a church with a chandelier in it. They said therefore to each other, "What shall we do here? Go home." When we got home, the cook asked if they had found. This is a lot of traveling back and forth. The foresters still not come home. When they got home, the cook asked if they had found them. So they said, "No, we found nothing but a church and a chandelier." And the cook scolded them and said, "You fools! Why did you not pull the church to pieces and bring the chandelier home with you?" And now the old cook herself got on her legs and went with the 3 servants in pursuit of the children. The children, however, saw from far off the 3 servants were coming, and the cook waddling after them. Then said Lena, "Foundling bird, never leave me, and I would never leave thee." Then said the foundling, "Neither now nor ever." Said Lena, "Be a fish pond, and I will be a duck upon it." What? The cook, however, came up to them, and when she saw the pond, she lay down by it, and was about to drink it up. But the duck swam quickly to her, and seized her by the head in its beak, and drew her into the water, and there the old witch had to drown. Then the children went home together, and were heartily delighted that they are not dead, and that they are living still. No, it's actually worded differently. They went home delighted, and if they are not dead, they are living still. That's like on the same part. When people die, when people are killed, they die. When people... It's like, yeah, they went home. They were happy. And as long as they're not dead, they're still alive. Okay. People die when they are killed. They were shot dead with a lethal shot that proved to be fatal. That reminds me. There's a... How'd it go in? "Ladies and gentlemen, hobos and tramps, cross-eyed mosquitoes, and 4-legged ants. Pull up a chair, sit on the floor. Admission is free, just pay at the door. One bright day in the middle of the night, 2 dead boys got into a fight. Back to back they faced each other, pulled out their swords, and shot each other. A deaf policeman heard the noise, came and shot the 2 dead boys. You don't believe my story's true? Just ask the blind man. He saw it too." I think I said that before in the Proteus videos. Those are some old videos, like a couple years ago now. So, next story, The Willow Wren and the Bear. Once in summertime, the bear and the wolf were walking in the forest, and the bear heard a bird singing so beautifully that he said, "Brother Wolf, what bird is it that sings so well?" "That is the king of birds," said the wolf, "for whom we must bow down." It was, however, in reality the willow wren. "If that's the case," said the bear, "I should very much like to see this royal palace. Come, take me thither." "That is not done quite as you seem to think," said the wolf. "You must wait until the queen comes." Soon afterward the queen arrived with food in her beak. And the lord king came too, and they began to feed their young ones. Their bear would have liked to go at once, but the wolf held him back by the sleeve and said, "No, you must wait until the lord and lady have gone away again." So they observed the hole in which the nest, and trotted away. The bear, however, could not rest until he had seen the royal palace, and when a short time had passed, again went to it. And the king and queen had just flown out. And so he peeped in and saw 5 or 6 young ones laying in it. "Is that the royal palace?" cried the bear. "It is a wretched palace, and you are not king's children. You are disreputable children." When the young wrens heard that, they were frightfully angry, and screamed, "No, that we are not. Our parents are honest people. Bear, That will have to pay for that." And the bear and the wolf grew uneasy, and turned back and went into their holes. The young willow wrens, however, continued to cry and scream, and when their parents again brought food, they said, "We will not so much as touch one fly's leg. No, not if we are dying of hunger, until you have settled whether we are respectable children or not. The bear has been here and has insulted us." Then the old king said, "Be easy, he shall be punished." And he at once flew with the queen to the bear's cave and called in, "Old growler, why hast thou insulted my children? Thou shalt suffer for it. We will punish thee by a bloody war." Thus war was announced to the bear, and all four-footed animals were summoned to take part in it: oxen, asses, cows, deer, and every other animal the earth contained. And the willow wren summoned everything that flew in the air, not only birds, large and small, but midges and hornets and bees and flies had to come. And when the time had come for the wren war to begin, the willow wren sent out spies to discover who was the enemy commander-in-chief. The gnat, who was the most crafty, flew into the forest where the enemy was assembled, and hid herself beneath a leaf of the tree where the watchword was to be given. There stood the bear, and he called the fox before him and said, "Fox, thou art the most cunning of all animals. Thou shalt be a general and lead us." "Good," said the fox, "but what signal shall we agree upon?" No one knew that, so the fox said, "I have a fine long bushy tail, with which almost looks like a plume of red feathers. When I lift my tail up quite high, all is going well, and you must charge. But if I let it hang down, run away as fast as you can." When the gnat had heard that, she flew away again and revealed everything with the greatest minuteness to the willow wren. When the day broke and the battle began, all the four-footed animals came running up with such noise that the earth trembled, and the willow wren also came flying through the air with his army with such a humming and whirring and swarming that everyone was uneasy and afraid. And on both sides they advanced against each other. But the willow wren sent down the hornet, and with orders to get beneath the fox's tail, and to sting with all his might. When the fox felt this first sting, he started that he drew up one leg, and with the pain, but he bore it, and still kept his tail high in the air. The second sting, he was forced to put it down for a moment. In the third, he could hold it no longer and screamed out and put his tail between his legs. When the animals saw that, they thought all was lost and began to fly, each one to his hole, and the birds had won the battle. Then the king and queen flew home to their children and cried, "Children, rejoice, eat and drink to your heart's content. We have won the battle." But the young wren said, "We will not eat yet. The bear must come to the nest and beg pardon, and say that we are honorable children before we do that." Then the willow wren flew to the bear's hole and cried, "Growler, thou art to come to the nest of my children and beg pardon, or else every rib of thy body shall be broken." And so the bear crept thither in the greatest fear and begged their pardon. And now that the young wrens were satisfied, sat down together, ate and drank, and made merry till quite late in the night. Sweetheart Roland. There once was a time a woman who was a real witch had two daughters, one ugly and wicked, and this one she loved because she was her own daughter, and one beautiful and good, and this one she hated because she was her stepdaughter. The stepdaughter once had a pretty apron, which the other fancied so much that she became envious and told her mother that she must and would have that apron. "Be quiet, my child," said the woman, "and thou shalt have it. Thy stepsister has long deserved death. Tonight, when she is asleep, I will come and cut her head off. And be careful that thou art on the far side of the bed, and push her well to the front." Well, fuck. It would have been all over with the Pearl Girl if she had not just then been standing in the corner and heard everything. Imagine she was just like a lot closer, like, "Guys, I'm right here. I'm standing right here." Or Drax, "I thought I was invisible." The previous story made me think like there's this thing where in the Bible they're having a battle and Joshua has to have his arms up in the air and he keeps getting tired and they keep raising his arms. That's stuff where you affect the placement of the sign. Or the thing where, let's see, it was Elisha, was bald, and a bunch of people made fun of him. So he summoned bears and he ripped everyone to shreds. Then I got Elijah was like casting like fire spells. Like, yes, I'm making a Magic the Gathering sort of joke, but I'm like, main thing is he just They kept trying to arrest him, and they just kept getting everyone burst in flames. So, yeah. A lot of things just caught fire in the past. That doesn't sound very safe. Okay, we're getting distracted. Focus. Okay. All day long she dared not go out of the doors, and when bedtime had come, the witch's daughter got into bed first, so as to lie on the far side. But when she was asleep, the other pushed her gently to the front, and took for herself the place at the back. Close by the wall in the night, the old woman came creeping in, and held her axe in her right hand, and felt with her left to see if anyone was lying on the outside, and then she grasped the axe with both hands, and cut her own child's head off. And when she had gone away, the girl got up and went to her sweetheart, who was called Roland, and knocked at his door. When he came out, she said to him, "Hear me, dearest Roland. We must fly away in all haste. My stepmother wanted to kill me, but has struck her own child. When daylight comes, and she sees what she has done, we shall be lost. But," said Roland, "I counsel thee first take away her magic wand, or we cannot escape if she pursues us." The maiden fetched the magic wand and took the dead girl's head, and dropped 3 drops of blood on the ground in front of the bed, 1 in the kitchen and 1 on the stairs. Then she hurried away with her lover. When the old witch got up the next morning, she called her daughter and wanted to give her the apron. But she did not come. When the witch cried, "Where art thou?" "Here on the stairs. I am weeping," answered the first drop of blood. The blood is talking. The old woman out, but saw no one on the stairs, and cried again, "Where art thou?" "Here in the kitchen. I am warming myself," cried the second drop of blood. She went to the kitchen, but found no one. Then she cried again, "Where art thou?" Here in bed. I am sleeping," cried the third drop of blood. And when she entered the room, what did she see there? Her own child, whose head she had cut off, bathed in her blood. The witch fell into a passion, and sprang to the window, and as she could look forth quite far into the world, she perceived her stepdaughter hurrying away with her sweetheart Roland. "That shall not serve you," cried she. "Even if you have got a long way off, you shall still not escape me." She put on many-league boots. What? She put on her many-league boots, in which went an hour's... She's got the fucking boots of Hermes? From, like, God of War? Did she kill Kratos? In which an hour's walk at every step. And it was not long before she... An hour's walk makes me think of Minecraft. Because the nether, for every 1 block in the nether, it's 11 blocks in the real world. So she built a Minecraft server and then rode, a minecart in the nether, then came out glowstone on the other side of the planet. Okay, back to the story. And it was not long before she overtook them. The girl, however, when she saw the old woman striding toward her, changed. She's just like flying through the sky, running fast. It's like an anime now. Changed with her magic wand, her sweetheart Roland into a lake, and herself into a duck swimming in the middle of it. The witch placed herself on the shore, threw breadcrumbs in, and gave herself every possible trouble to entice the duck. But the duck did not let herself be enticed. And the woman had to go home at night as she had come. On this, the girl and her sweetheart Roland resumed their natural shapes again, and they walked on the whole night until daybreak. Then the maiden changed herself into a beautiful flower, which stood in the midst of a briar hedge, and her sweetheart Roland into a fiddler. It was not long before the witch came riding toward him and said to the musician, "Dear musician, may I pluck that beautiful flower for myself?" "Oh yes," he replied, "I will play to you while you do it." As she was hastily creeping under the hedge, and was just going to pluck it, flower, for she knew well who the flower was, he began to play, and whether she would or not, she was forced to dance, for it is a magical dance. The quicker he played, Gangnam Style, ooh, 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 Gangnam Style, ooh. Guys, remember that song by Psy? It's a South Korean musician. Gangnam Style, ooh. He also did songs like Mother, Father, Gentleman, Daddy, New Face, I Love It. He even did a thing with Snoop Dogg called Hangover. So as she was forced to dance to Gangnam Style, for she was forced for is a magical dance. The quicker he played, the more violent springs she was forced to make, and the thorns tore her clothes from her body and pricked her and wounded her till she bled. And as he did not stop, she had to dance till she lay down dead on the ground. And when they were delivered, Roland said, "Now I will go to my father and arrange for the wedding." "Then, in the meantime, I will stay here and wait for thee," said the girl, "and that no one may recognize me, I'll change myself into a red stone landmark." Then Roland went away, and the girl stood like a red landmark in the field, and waited for her beloved. But when Roland got home, he fell into the snares of another, who prevailed on him so far that he forgot the... So did somebody jump him and kill him? Or did he just meet a girl and said, "Hey, she's cute," and started fucking her and then just forgot about his fiancée? It's open to interpretation. The poor girl remained there a long time, but at length he did not return at all. She was sad, changed herself into a flower, and thought someone will surely come this way and trample. She's trying to die? It's suicide, but with extra steps. It befell, however, that a shepherd kept his sheep in the field, and saw the flower, and so it was pretty, and plucked it, and took it with him, and laid it away in his chest. From that time forth, strange things happened in the shepherd's house. When he arose in the morning, all the work was already done, and the room was swept, and the table and the benches were clean, and the fire on the hearth was lighted, and the water was fetched, and at noon, when he came home, the table was laid, and a good dinner was served. He could not conceive how this was to come to pass, for he never saw a human being in the house, and no one could have concealed himself in it. He was certainly pleased with this good attendance, but still at last he was so afraid that he went to a wise woman and asked for her advice. And the wise woman said, "There is some enchantment behind it. Listen very early some morning, if anything is moving in the room, and if thou seest anything, let it be what it may, and throw a white cloth over it, and then the magic will be stopped." The shepherd did as she bade him, and the next morning, just as day dawned, he saw the chest open and the flower come out, and swiftly as he sprang toward it, he threw a white cloth over it. Instantly the transformation came to an end, and a beautiful girl stood before him, who owned to him that she had been the flower, and that up to this time she had attended his housekeeping. She told him her story, and as she pleased him, he asked her if she would marry him, but she answered no, for she wanted to remain faithful to her sweetheart Roland, although he had deserted her. But she promised not to go away, but to keep the house for the shepherd for the future. And now the time drew near when Roland's wedding was to be celebrated, and then, according to old custom in the country, it was announced that all the girls should be present at it. But why, though? And sing in honor of the... That sounds so fucking egotistical! When the faithful maiden heard of this, she grew so sad that the thought her heart would break, and so she would not go thither. But the other girls came and took her. That sounds like kidnapping! When it came to her turn to sing, she stepped back until at last she was the only one left. Then she could not refuse. But when she began her song, it reached Roland's ears. He sprang up and cried, "I know that voice. That is the true... I will have no..." You abandoned her? And what about the person that you're about to get married to? "I will have no..." Everything he had forgotten, which had vanished from his mind, had suddenly come home to his heart. Then the faithful maiden held her wedding with her sweetheart Roland, and grief came to an end, and joy began. But I feel like there's multiple ways that can be reinterpreted, both in the old setting and in modern settings. And I'm just still left with, like, what is the moral of the story? There once was a widow who had 2 daughters, one of whom was pretty and industrious, whilst the other was ugly and idle. But she was much fonder of the ugly and idle one, because she was her own daughter, and the other who was the stepdaughter and obliged to do all the work, and to be the Cinderella of the house. Are you... So this story of Mother Hall's occurring at the point where Cinderella is already considered an established fucking TV trope of the land. Every day the poor girl had to sit by a well in the highway and spin till her fingers bled. Now it happened that one day the shuttle was marked with her blood, and so she dipped it in a well to wash the mark off. But it dropped out of her hand and fell into the bottom. She began to weep, and ran to her stepmother and told her of the mishap. But her stepmother scolded her so sharply, and was merciless as to say, "Since you have let the shuttle fall, you must fetch it out again." So the girl went back to the well and did not know what to do, and in the sorrow of her heart jumped into the well to get the shuttle. She lost her senses, and when she awoke she came to herself again. She was in a lovely meadow, where the sun was... This sounds like she got a concussion and she's having a delusion. I think she's just bleeding to death in a hole. Along this meadow she went, and at last came to a baker's oven full of bread. And the bread cried out, "Oh, take me out, I shall burn. I have been baked a long time." So she went up to it and took out the loaves one after another with bread shovel. After that she went out to a tree covered with apples, which called out to her, "Oh, shake me, we apples are all ripe." So she shook the tree until the apples fell like rain, and went on shaking till they were all down, and when she had gathered them into a heap, she went on her way. At last she came to a little house, out of which the old woman peeped. But she had such large teeth that the girl was frightened. Okay, we literally have a picture here where there's a girl peering around the side of a house, and the picture they have of an old woman, you don't see teeth, you just see giant black holes. And it's literally like they drew an SCP. They drew a cryptid. They drew a creepypasta monster. Like, it's like a withered skeleton zombie. That's not an elderly person. Oh, there's a cat over there. Okay, where was I? But the old woman cried out to her, "What are you afraid of, dear child? Stay with me. If you would do all the work in the house properly, you shall be better for it. Only you must take care to make my bed well, and shake it thoroughly till the feathers fly. For then there is snow on the earth. I am Mother Hull." So what, are you fucking Demeter from Greek mythology? As the old woman spoke so kindly to her, the girl took courage and agreed to enter her service. She attended to everything to the satisfaction of her mistress, and as always shook her bed so vigorously that the feathers flew out about like snowflakes. And so she had a pleasant life, never an angry word, and she was given boiled or roast meat every day. She stayed some time with Mother Hall, and then she became sad. At first she did not know what was the matter with her, but it found at length that it was homesickness. Although she may be many thousand times better off here than at home, she still had a longing to be there. Were you fucking institutionalization? It's like where a person's in prison long enough to where, even though prison is a shitty place, they're just so used to it that they can't function in the outside world, sort of thing. Like, it's just what they're used to. Like, it's a shitty situation, but... Or is that Stockholm Syndrome we're talking about at this point? I don't know. At last she said, "Oh, I have a longing for home. And however well off I am down here, I cannot stay any longer. I must go up again to my own people." You make it sound like she's not human. Is she not human? Mother Hall said, "I am pleased that you long for your home again. And as you have served me so truly, I myself will take you up again." Thereupon she took her by the hand and led her to the large door. The door was open, and just as the maiden was standing beneath the doorway, a heavy shower of golden rain fell. Zeus? And all the gold remained sticking to her, so that she was completely covered with it. "You shall have that because you have been so industrious," said Mother Hall. So thrifty and hard-working and loyal, I guess. At the same time, she gave her back the shuttle, which she had let fall into the well. Thereupon the door closed, and the maiden found herself up above upon the earth, and not far from the mother's house. And as she went into the yard, the cock was standing by the well and cried, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, your golden girl has come back to you." So she went to her mother, and as she arrived, thus covered with gold, she was well received, both by her and her sister. The girl told all that had happened to her, and as soon as the mother heard how she had come by so much wealth, she was very anxious to obtain the same good luck for the ugly and lazy daughter. She had to seat herself by the well and spin, and in order for the shuttle might be stained with blood, she stuck her hand into a thorn bush and pricked her finger. Then she threw the shuttle into the well and jumped in after it. She came, like the other, to a beautiful meadow and walked along the very same path. When she got to the oven bread and cried, "Oh, take me out, or I shall burn. I have been baked a long time." But the lazy thing answered, "Ah, as if I had any wish to make myself dirty." And on she went. Soon she came to the apple tree, which cried, "Oh, shake me, shake me. We apples are all ripe." But she answered, "I like that. One of you might fall on my head." And so went on. When she came to Mother Holle's house, she was not afraid, for she had already heard of the big teeth, and she hired her immediately. The first day she was forced to work diligently and obeyed Mother Holle. When she told her to do anything, for she was thinking of all the gold that she would give her, but on the second day she began to be lazy, and on the third day still more so. Then she would not get up in the morning at all. Neither did she make Mother Holle's bed as she ought, and he did not shake so as to make the feathers fly up. Mother Holle was soon tired of this, and gave her notice to leave. The lazy girl was willing enough to go, and thought that now the golden rain would come, and Mother Holle led her also to the great door. But while she was standing there beneath it, instead of the gold, a big kettleful of pitch, tar and stuff, was emptied over her. "That is the reward for your service," said Mother Holle, and shut the door. So the lazy girl went home, but she was quite covered with pitch. And the cock by the well side, as soon as saw her, said, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, your pitchy girl's come back to you." But the pitch stuck fast to her, and could not get off for as long as she lived. The White Snake. A long time ago there lived a king who was famed for his wealth throughout all the land. Nothing was hidden from him, and it seemed as if news of the most secret things was brought to him through the air. But he had a strange custom. Every day after dinner, when the table was cleared, and no one else was present, a trusty servant had to bring him one more dish. And it was covered, however, and even the servant did not know what was in it. Neither did anyone, for the king never took off the cover to eat of it until he was quite alone. This had gone on for a long time, when one day the servant who took away the dish was overcome with such curiosity that he could not help carrying the dish into his room. When he had carefully locked the door and lifted up the cover, he saw a white snake laying on the dish. But when he saw it, he could not deny himself the pleasure of tasting it. So he cut off a little bit and put it into his mouth. No sooner had it touched his tongue than he heard a strange whispering of little voices outside his window. He went and listened, and then noticed that it was sparrows who were chattering together, and telling one another all kinds of things that they had seen in the fields, and eating the snake had given the power of understanding the language of animals. Now it so happened on this very day the queen lost her most beautiful ring, and the suspicion of having stolen it fell upon this trusty servant, who was allowed to go everywhere. The king ordered the man to be brought before him, and threatened him with angry words that unless he could before the morrow point out the thief, he himself would be looked upon as guilty and executed. In vain he declared his innocence. He was dismissed with no better answer. In his trouble and fear he went down to the courtyard and took thought of how to help himself out of his trouble. Now some ducks were sitting together quietly by a brook and taking their rest, and whilst they were making their feathers smooth with their bills, they were having a confidential conversation together. The servant stood by and listened. They were telling one another about all the places they had been waddling about in the morning, and what good food they had found, and in one pitiful tone, "Something lies heavy on my stomach. As I was eating in haste, I swallowed a ring which lay under the queen's window." And there's a picture over here of him, I assume, talking to a fish. They quivered with light, put out their heads, and cried to him, "We will remember you and repay you for saving us." The servant once seized her by the neck and carried her to the kitchen and said to the cook, "Here is a fine duck, pray kill her." "Yes," said the cook, and weighed her in his hand. "She has spared no trouble to fatten herself, and has been waiting to be roasted long enough." So he cut off her head, and as she was being dressed for the spit, the queen's ring was found inside her. The servant could now easily prove his innocence, and the king, to make amends for his wrong, allowed him to ask a favor, and promised him the best place in court that he could wish for. The servant refused everything, and only asked for a horse and some money for traveling, as he had mind to see the world and go about a little. When his request was granted, he set out on his way, and one day came to a pond, where he saw 3 fishes caught in the reeds, and gasping for water. And now, though it is said that the fishes are dumb, he heard them lamenting that they must perish so miserably, and as he had a kind heart, he got off his horse and put 3 prisoners back into the water. They quivered with delight, put out their heads, and cried to him, "We will remember you, and we will repay you for saving us." He rode on, and after a while, it seemed to him he had heard a voice in the sand at his feet. He listened, and heard an ant king complain, "Why cannot folks with their clumsy beasts keep off our bodies? That stupid horse with his heavy hoofs has been treading down my people without mercy." So he turned to a side path, and the ant king cried out to him, "We will remember you. One good turn deserves another." The path led him into the wood, and he saw 2 old ravens standing by their nest and throwing out their young ones. "Out with you, you idle, good-for-nothing creatures," cried they. "We cannot find food for you any longer. You are big enough and can provide for yourselves." But the poor young ravens lay upon the ground, flapping their wings, crying, "Oh, what helpless chicks we are! We must shift for ourselves, and yet we cannot fly. What can we do but lie here and starve?" And so the good young fellow alighted and killed his horse with his sword, and gave it to them for food. Then they came hopping up to it, satisfied their hunger, and cried, "We will remember you." They ate the whole horse! One good turn deserves another. And now he had to use his own legs. And when he had walked a long way, he came to a large city. And there was a great noise and crowd in the streets, and a man rode up on horseback, crying aloud, "The king's daughter wants a husband. But whoever sues for her hand must perform a hard task. And if he does not succeed, he will forfeit his life." Many had already made the attempt, but in vain. Nevertheless, when the youth saw the king's daughter, he was so overcome by her great beauty that he forgot all the danger, went before the king, and declared himself a suitor. So he was led out to sea, and a gold ring was thrown into it, in his sight. Then the king ordered him to fetch the ring up from the bottom of the sea, and added, "If you come up again without it, you will be thrown in again and again until you perish amid the waves." All the people agreed for the handsome youth. Then they went away, leaving him alone by the sea. He stood by the shore and considered what he should do, when suddenly he saw 3 fishes come swimming toward him, and they were the very fishes whose lives he had saved. The one in the middle had a mussel in his mouth, and which laid on the shore at the young's feet. When he had fully taken it up and opened it, there lay a golden ring in the shell. Full of joy, he took it to the king, and expected that he would grant him the promised reward. But when the proud princess perceived that he was not her equal in birth, she scorned him, and required him first to perform another task. She went down to the garden and strewed with her own hands 10 sacks full of millet seed on the grass. Then she said, "Tomorrow morning, before sunrise, these must be picked up, and not a single grain be wanting." And the youth sat down in the garden and considered how it might be possible to perform such a task. But he could think of nothing, and there sat sorrowfully waiting for the break of day, when he should be led to death. I don't think she's going to make a good wife if she obviously doesn't like you. And she's going to put you in a situation where you are going to die. I don't think relationships, according to, stories and fairy tales, are very healthy. Okay. But as soon as the first rays of the sun shone to the guard, he saw all 10 sacks were standing side by side, quite full, and not a single grain was missing. The ant king had come in the night, thousands and thousands of ants, and the grateful creatures had great industry, picked up all the millet seed, and gathered them into sacks. Presently the king's daughter herself came down to the garden, and was amazed to see the young man had done the task given him. But she could not yet conquer her proud heart, and said, "Although he has performed both tasks, he shall not be a husband until he has brought me an apple from the tree of life." The youth did not know where the tree of life stood, but he set out and would not have gone forever, as long as his legs would carry him, though he had no hope of finding it. After he had wandered through 3 kingdoms, he came out one evening to a wood and lay down under a tree to sleep. But he heard rustling in the branches, and a golden apple fell into his hand. And at the same time 3 ravens flew down to him and perched themselves upon his knee and said, "We are the 3 young ravens whom you saved from starving when we had grown big and heard that you were seeking the golden apple. We flew over the sea to the end of the world, to the actual fucking Garden of Eden, where the tree of life stands, and brought you the apple. We also fought Frieza in his final form." The youth, full of joy, set out homewards, and took the golden apple to the king's beautiful daughter, who had no more excuses left to make. They cut the apple of life in 2 and ate it together, and then her heart became full of love for him, and they lived in undisturbed happiness to a great age. Not just they lived happily ever after, they lived in undisturbed happiness. The Queen Bee. 2 kings' sons once went out in search of adventures, and fell into a wild, disorderly way of living, so that they never came back home again. The youngest, who was called Simpleton, set out to seek his brothers, but when he had found them, they mocked him for thinking that he, with his simplicity, could get through the world, when they too could not make their way, and yet were so much more clever. They all 3 traveled away together, and came to an ant-hill. The 2 elder wanted to destroy it to see the little ants creeping out in terror, and carrying their eggs away. But Simpleton said, "Leave the creatures in peace. I will not allow you to disturb them." Then they went onwards and came to a lake, on which a great number of ducks were swimming. The 2 brothers wanted to catch a couple and roast them, but Simpleton would not permit it, and said, "Leave the creatures in peace. I will not suffer you to kill them." At length they came to a bee's nest, in which there was so much honey in it that it ran out of the trunk of the tree. The 2 wanted to make a fire beneath the tree to suffocate the bees, in order to take away the honey. But Simpleton again stopped them and said, "Leave the creatures in peace. I will not allow you to burn them." At length the 3 brothers arrived at a castle, where stone horses were standing in the stables, and no human being was to be seen. They went through all the halls until, quite at the end, they came to a door in which there were 3 locks. In the middle of the door, however, there was a little pane through which they could see into the room. They saw a little gray man who was sitting at the table. They called him once, twice, but he did not hear. At last they called him a 3rd time, whereupon he got up and opened the locks and came out. He said nothing, however, but conducted them to a handsomely spread table. And when they had eaten and drunk, he took each of them to a bedroom? What? I think I'm reading too much into that. Next morning the little gray man came to the eldest, beckoned to him, and conducted him to a stone table, on which were inscribed 3 tasks, by the performance of which the castle could be delivered. The first was that in the forest, beneath the moss, lay the princess's pearls, 1,000 in number, which must be picked up, and if by sunset 1 single pearl was wanting, he who had looked for them would be turned into stone. The eldest went thither and sought the whole day, but when it came to an end he had only found 100. And what was written on the table came to pass, and he was changed into stone. The next day the 2nd brother undertook the adventure. It did not, however, fare much better with him than the eldest. He did not find more than 200 pearls. He was changed to stone. At last turned to Simpleton to do so, who sought in the moss. It was, however, so hard to find the pearls, he got on so slowly that he seated himself on a stone and wept. And while he was thus sitting, the king of the ants, whose life he had once saved, came with 5,000 ants, and before long the little creatures had got all the pearls together and laid them in a heap. The second task was to fetch out of the lake the key of the king's daughter's bedchamber. When Simpleton had come to the lake, the ducks which he had saved swam up to him, dived down, and brought the key out of the water. The third task was the most difficult, for among the 3 sleeping daughters of the king's youngest and dearest was to be sought out. They, however, resembled each other exactly. Okay. And were only to be distinguished by having eaten different sweetmeats before they fell asleep. The eldest, a bit of sugar, the second, a little bit of syrup, and the youngest, a spoonful of honey. Then the queen of the bees, which Simpleton had protected from the fire, came and tasted the lips of all 3. And at last she remained sitting on the mouth of which she had eaten honey, and thus the king's son recognized the right princess. Then the enchantment was at an end, everything was released from sleep, and those who had been turned to stone received once more their natural forms. Simpleton married the youngest and sweetest princess. After her father's death he became king, and his 2 brothers received the 2 other sisters. Okay. The Golden Goose. There was a man who had 3 sons, the youngest of whom was called Simpleton, and was despised and laughed at, and neglected on every occasion. It happened one day that the eldest son wished to go into the forest to cut wood, and before he went to his mother, gave him delicious pancake and a flask of wine, that he might not suffer from hunger and thirst. When he came into the forest, a little old grey man met him, who wished him good day, and said, "Give me a bit of cake out of your pocket, and let me drink your wine. I am so hungry and thirsty." But the prudent youth answered, "Give you my cake and my wine? I haven't got any, be off of you." And leaving the little man standing there, he went off. Then he began to fell a tree, but he had not been at it long before he was made a wrong stroke, and the hatchet hit him in the arm, so that he was obliged to go home and get it bound up. That was what came of the little grey man. Afterwards, the second son went into the wood, and the mother gave him, as to the eldest, a pancake and a flask of wine. The little old grey man met him also, and begged for a little bit of cake and a drink of wine. But the second son spoke out plainly, saying, "What I give you, I lose myself, so be off with you." And leaving the little man standing there, he went off. The punishment followed. As he was chopping away at the tree, he hit himself in the leg so severely he had to be carried home. Then said the simpleton, "Father, let me go for once into the forest to cut wood." And the father answered, "Your brothers have hurt themselves by so doing. Give it up. You understand nothing about it." But the simpleton went on begging so long that the father said at least, "Well, be off of you. You will only learn by experience." The mother gave him a cake. It was made with only water and baked in the ashes, and the flask was sour beer. When he came to the forest, a little old grey man met him in agreement, saying, "Give me a bit of your cake and a drink from your flask. I am so hungry and thirsty." And the simpleton answered, "I have only a flour with water cake and sour beer, but if that is good enough for you, let us sit down together and eat." Then they sat down, and as the simpleton took out his flour and water cake, it became a rich pancake, and his sour beer became good wine. Then they ate and drank, and afterwards the little man said, "As you have such a kind heart, and shared what you have so willingly, I will bestow good luck upon you. Yonder stands an old tree. Cut it down, and at its roots you will find something." Thereupon the little man took his departure. The simpleton went there and hewed away at the tree, and when it fell he saw sitting among the roots a goose with feathers of pure gold. He lifted it out and took it with him to an inn where he intended to stay the night. The landlord had 3 daughters, who, when they saw the goose, were curious to know what wonderful kind of bird it was, and ended by longing for one of its golden feathers. The eldest thought, "I will wait for a good opportunity, then I will pull one of its feathers for myself." And so, when the simpleton was gone out, she seized the goose by its wing. But there her finger in hand had to stay, held fast. Soon after came the second sister, with the same idea of plucking the sister feather. But scarcely had she touched her sister, that she was also obliged to be held fast. Lastly came the third, with the same intentions, but the others screamed out, "Stay away! For heaven's sake, stay away!" But she did not see why she shouted to stay away, and thought, if they do so, why should not I? And went toward them. But when she reached her sisters, she was stopped there, hanging on with them, and so they all had to stay all night. The next morning, the simpleton took the goose under his arm, and went away unmindful, for the three girls... So he is walking carrying this goose, and he just doesn't notice the three adults just there. He's walking, holding this goose in hand, with three adults trailing behind him, basically holding his hand, and he doesn't even notice them. Okay. The three had to run after him. He's like running full sprint left and right wherever his legs carried him. In the midst of the fields, they met the parson, who, when he saw the procession, said, "Shame on you girls, running after a young fellow through the fields like this." And forthwith he seized hold of the youngest by the hand to drag her away. But hardly had he touched her, he was too obliged to run after them himself. Not long after, the sexton came out of the way. Seeing the respected parson following the heels of three girls, he called out, "Hey! Ho! Your reverence! Whither away so quickly? You forget that we have another christening today." And he seized a hold of him by his gown. But no sooner as he touched him than he was obliged to follow on too. As the five tramped on, one after another, two peasants with their hoes came up from the ground, and the parson cried out to them and begged them to come and set him and the sexton free. But no sooner had they touched them. It's just a picture of a long line of... How are you not noticing 20 people trailing behind you holding hands? They had fallen too, but now there were 7 following Simpson and the goose. By and by they came to a town where the king reigned, who had only a daughter who was so serious... Why so serious? That no one could make her laugh. Therefore the king had given out that whoever should make her laugh should have her in marriage. The simpleton went, he heard this, and with the goose and the hanger-on in the presence of the king and daughter, and as soon as she saw the 7 people following ways, one after another, she burst out laughing, and it seemed as if she could never stop. "He brought a haunter! Haunter! Haunter, haunt!" And so the simpleton earned the right to her as a bride. But the king did not like him for a son-in-law, and made all kinds of objections, and said he must first bring a man who could drink up a whole cellar of wine. The simpleton thought the little gray man would be able to help him, and went out into the forest, and there, on the very spot where he felled the tree, he saw a man sitting with a very sad countenance. Okay. Why? Why so sad? Yes. Or Sidious. Okay, we're not making a Star Wars joke. The simpleton asked him, what was the matter? And he answered, I have a great thirst, which I cannot quench. Cold water does not agree with me, and I have indeed drunk up a whole cask of wine. But what good is a drop like that? Then said the simpleton, I can help you, only come with me, and you shall have enough. He took him straight to the king's cellar, and the man sat himself down before the big vats, and drank and drank and drank. Before a day was over, he drank up the whole cellar food. The simpleton again asked for his bride, but the king was annoyed at the wretched fellow, called the simpleton by everybody, should carry off his daughter. And so he made new conditions. He was to produce a man who could eat up a mountain of bread. The simpleton did not hesitate long, but ran quickly off to the forest, and there in the same place that the man fastened with a strap around his body, making a very piteous fate, and saying, I have eaten a whole bakehouse full of rolls. But what is the use when one is so hungry as I am? The stomach wheels fight emptily. I am obliged to strap myself together, that I may not die of hunger. The simpleton was quite glad of this, and said, Get up quickly, and come along with me, and you shall have enough to eat. He led him straight to the king's courtyard, where all the meal in the kingdom had been collected and baked in a mountain of bread. And the man out of the forest settled himself down. Are you still dragging these 7 people around this whole time? And one day, whole mountain had disappeared. Then the simpleton asked for his bride a third time. The king, however, found one more excuse, and said he must have a ship that should be able to sail on land or water. So soon, said he, as you come sailing along with it, you shall have my daughter for wife. The simpleton went straight to the forest, and there sat the little old man, with whom he had shared his cake, and said, I have eaten for you, and I have drunk for you, and I will also give you the ship, and all because you were kind to me at first. Then he gave him the ship, and could sail on land and water. And when the king saw it, he knew that he could no longer withhold his daughter. The marriage took place immediately, and at the death of the king, the simpleton possessed the kingdom, and lived long and happily with his wife. Okay? Jorinda and Jorindel. There once was an old castle in the middle of a deep wood, and in it an old woman, who was a witch, lived all by herself. In the daytime she changed into a cat or a screech owl, but in the evening she took her proper shape again as a human being. She lured wild beasts and birds to her, and then she killed and boiled and roasted them. If anyone came within 100 steps of the castle, he must needs stand still, and that he could not stir from the place until she bade him free. But whenever a young maid came within the circle, the woman changed into a bird, and shut her up in a wicker-work cage, and carried the cage into a room in the castle. She had about 7,000 cages of rare birds in her castle. Now there was once a maiden who was named Jorinda, who was fairer than all the other girls. She had a handsome youth named Jorindel had promised to marry each other, and their greatest happiness was in being together. One day, in order that they might be able to walk together in cycling, they went for a walk in the forest. Take care, said Jorindel, that you do not go too near the castle. It was at the end of the beautiful day. The sun shot its beams out between the trunks of the trees, and the turtle doves sang mournfully upon the young boughs of birch trees. Jorinda wept now, and said she did not know why. The sun was low in the west, and a sadness came over her. Jorinda was sorrowful too. They were as sad as if they were about to die. Then they looked around them, and they were quite at a loss, for they did not know by which way they should go home. The sun was still half above the mountain, but the other half was set. Jorinda looked through the bushes, and saw they were close to an old castle. He was filled with deadly fear. Jorinda was singing. My little bird, with necklace red, sings sorrow, sorrow, sorrow. He sings, the dove must soon be dead. Sing sorrow, sorrow, jug, jug, jug. Jorinda looked for Jorinda, and she was changed into a nightingale and sang jug, jug, jug. A screech owl with glowing eyes flew 3 times round about her, and 3 times cried, to-woo, to-hoo, to-hoo. Jorinda could not move. He stood there like a stone, and could neither weep nor speak, nor move hand or feet. The sun had now set, and the owl flew into the thicket, and at once there came out a crooked old woman, yellow and lean, with large red eyes and a hooked nose, and the point of which reached her chin. She muttered to herself, caught the nightingale, and took it away in her hand. Jorinda could neither speak nor move from the spot. The nightingale was gone, and at last the woman came back, and said in a hollow voice, Greet thee, Zachiel. If the moon shines on the cage, Zachiel, let him loose at once. Then Jorinda was freed. He fell on his knees before the woman and begged that she would give back his Jorinda. But she said, that he should never have her again, and went away. He called, he wept, but all in vain. Ah, what is to become of me? Jorinda went away, and at last came to a strange village. There he kept sheep for a long time. He often walked round and round the castle, but not too near it. At last he dreamt one night that he found a blood-red flower, and in the middle of it was a beautiful large pearl. He dreamt again that he picked the red flower and went to the castle, and that everything he touched with the flower was freed from enchantment, that he also dreamt by means of it to set Jorinda free. In the morning he awoke, and he began to seek over the hill and dale for the flower he had seen in his dream. 7 days he sought for it, and then early in the morning he found the blood-red flower, and in the middle of it there was a large dewdrop, as big as a finest pearl. Day and night he went on his way with this flower to the castle, and when he was within 100 steps, he had not held fast, but walked on to the door. Jorinda was full of joy. He touched the door with the flower and it sprang open. He walked through the courtyard and listened for the sound of birds. At last he heard it and went on, found the room from whence it came. And there the witch was feeding the birds in 7,000 cages. When she saw Jorindel, she was angry, very angry, and scolded, but she could not come within 2 steps of him. He did not take any notice of her, but went and looked at the cages with the birds. But there were many hundreds of nightingales. How was he to find Jorindel again? Just then he saw the old woman quietly take away a cage of a bird and go toward the door. Swiftly he sprang toward her and touched her in the cage with the flower. The woman could no longer bewitch anyone, and Jorindel was standing there, clasping him around the neck, and she was as beautiful as ever. Well, that's the end of the story. Hope everyone had a wonderful day. Bye.